All righty. What I would like to do right now is say hello, hello. I am Barry Ball, a speakerpreneur and a leadership enthusiast, and I am the host of the Leadership Library. It is the #1 podcast for leadership for millennials. And here we are going to be interviewing some folks who are doing major things when it comes to leadership in various industries. Want to be able to give you insight into the mind of your boss or your boss's boss, and maybe even higher than that sometimes, so you really know what to expect when you get into your respective industry. So here we have Colonel Eric McCoy, and I would like to just give you some time to, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're about.
Hey, thanks again for having me on, Barry. Always good to see you. Appreciate your passion for the discipline of making people better. And I really look forward to the opportunity to exchange ideas with you and your audience. A little bit about me. I'm a native of Baltimore, Maryland. Have been in the military for approximately 23 years now. My military specialty, or as we like to affectionately recall it, our occupational specialty, our MOS. I'm what's called a multifunctional logistician. So if you take Jiffy Lube, Walmart, and UPS, and you put them in a blender and mix it, that's what I do for the U.S. Army in terms of organizing supply chains. So professionally, that's what I look at. My initial undergraduate discipline was in behavioral science and mental health. So originally I came into the military to be a social worker. Interesting discussion if we get into it. But I left that behind, initially looking at just the 8-year commitment. And I thought that the Ordnance Corps would be something good to build job skills and then transfer out to the civilian world. 8 years turned to 12, 12 turned to 20. Now I'm at 23. And while my professional discipline is in the field of supply chain management, my personal interests still revolve around human potential, human development, leadership development, and how we can organize teams better to accomplish tasks in the workplace, either in service to the business or in service to the communities that we operate in. So over time, I've looked at mentorship a lot in terms of effective leadership principles, how people lead among teams, whether those leadership roles are split out among the team or they reside within the leader, and then what are the right attributes that we want to seek. So it's ironic in terms of looking at leadership and guidance for millennials, how millennials think, how millennials are motivated, how post-millennials think and are motivated, and how does that impact what we see for leadership in the workforce of tomorrow. So that's what excites me outside of hobbies and doing stuff with my family. So really looking forward to our conversation on what your audience can expect out of their workplaces.
All righty. Wow, that is so powerful. I just want to say right now, I'm so glad to have you, and I'm looking forward to this conversation too. So that last snippet of what you said when you were talking about millennials, what they bring to the workforce, how they show up, and how you've experienced them. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So it's interesting. One of my mentees, Chris Maganero, wrote a piece from the Green Notebook. So for your millennial audience that looks for digital leader development tools, from the Green Notebook is a great resource in terms of different pieces that are out there for leadership. But a few years back, probably around 2015, 2016, Chris wrote a piece on the 5 love languages for millennials in terms of love languages for leadership and how to lead millennials. And I think the biggest piece that came back to me is explaining why. So Simon Sinek wrote a great book on Start With Why in terms of being able to get commitment from your workforce. And sometimes I would say older generations or people that have a disparaging view of millennials will look at that and go, okay, hey, that the time to explain why is like, okay, like, so why you explain why to your kids or why you explain why to millennials? And I think that has to do with how millennials process information, and it also has to do what the motivations for millennials are. So, what motivated me growing up in terms of, hey, that this is the carrot and the stick is something I want to go after because of all the different sensory inputs that millennials have that we don't necessarily have access to, whether you're talking 24-hour news, whether you're talking the power of smartphones and how information proliferates. Because of the information age, how they process information and how they view the world is fundamentally different. And what I would say is much flatter. So before, where a leader's audio may not match their video, and the workforce may not be aware of that, and the era of information, the 24-hour news cycle, how quickly you can Google anything about anybody and pull down their entire digital history, you have to start with why in terms of being able to connect very deeply with what drives and motivates your workforce. So sometimes it's not enough of, okay, hey, it's about the paycheck. It's about a sense of purpose and connection. It's about corporate and civic responsibility and people feeling a larger piece of motivation in terms of what makes them tick, what makes the organization tick. So I think that spending that investment early on in terms of being able to connect with your workforce, not only explain the why of your corporate organization or your business, but taking the time and dialogue with your employees and your team as to what their why is, what motivates them, what brings them into work, what's their 3-year plan, what's their 5-year plan, and then finding the intersections within that. I think you unlock commitment in the organization versus people just saying, hey, I'm giving X amount of work for X amount of paycheck. And then I think once they're committed to organization, once they're committed to its long-term goals, once they discover the alignment between their individual goals and the goals of the organization, I think you have better efficiencies and you have a more productive workforce, you have a more productive organization.
So what I'm hearing, it's like millennials are revolutionizing how we have to communicate. Is that holding true with you? And having to connect with the why.
Yes, I think so, mainly because of the power of information movements. So your connection with millennials and post millennials becomes very important. So we look at, for instance, Fort Hood, and we look at the lessons that we've learned from the death of Vanessa Gilliam. And if you peel back the onion very early in terms of how that caught attention and how that quickly snowballed and became overwhelming in terms of our news cycles and things that are going on, a lot of it is, again, in terms of that communication and how technology connects us. So people that encountered similar challenges in terms of trust between leaders and the led, in terms of situations in their environment, they found connection and they found communities in those stories, in those hashtags, in those social media rooms, and the like. And I think, one, you look at how millennials think and how they're motivated and what drives them, and then you add an accelerator, if you will, in terms of these are the different things that technology allows us to do, and very quickly, I think you're in a unique place where the intersection of the motivations of people and the capabilities of technology start to redefine how we engage. I know a book I had to look at in school a few years back, The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly, talks about these different technological advances and changes in society that very quickly you have to be able to take a look at and be cognizant of. So it's not to go and say, hey, that we bow down at the altar of millennials or something to be afraid of or a negative emotion, but it's definitely something to acknowledge that how they take in information, how they're oriented to the world is important to be aware of. And then just as we gain information from that, they should be able to gain perspective from us. So trying to find where those gaps are and how we can take on the experiences of baby boomers, of Gen Xers, or Gen Yers in terms of trying to find the connective tissue to be able to work together.
That's so rich. That's so rich. So what I want to do is really let's get to the juice if we can. Let's get to the moment of the hour, what folks are really expecting to hear, and what I know I am expecting and anxious to hear about is, so what do you expect of the newcomers coming into your unit, of these new lieutenants, or maybe even just new soldiers in general? Yeah, how can we manage their expectations and know, yeah, this is something that to be prepared for?
So the piece I used to give to my lieutenants and vice that try to help people capture things. I'm pretty sure you probably heard of this during your time at West Point, your first unit. Something I plagiarized from previous bosses a while ago. They talk about the 3 C's: character, competence, and commitment, and how you frame that in the post-millennial environment. So I think the first piece that you look at is competence. So in terms of knowing your craft. So what I would probably look at, or I find important for my workforce, is competency at your trade craft or competency at your skill. So almost every organization, whether it's the military, whether it's corporate America, or the like, as you come into a job, that there are certain skills and attributes that are associated with that position. And those skills and attributes oftentimes are evaluated. So whether it's on your evaluation report in the military, whether you're going to the field or you're going to the range, in corporate America, if it's an engagement with a client or your daily 9 to 5, that you're just being evaluated. So we expect our workforce to know what they're doing. So whether it's your pre-leadership training, pre-commissioning training, or the like, to go out and learn and be able to do your job well. And a lot of times it's associated with a desire for lifelong learning. So continually take on competencies, continuing to grow. How are you growing and developing and gaining perspective? So competence is important. And a lot of times we talk about folks are just, hey, I just want to go and gravitate around people and just use the force of will to make them do what I need to do. No, the further up you go, you have to know not only a lot about your craft, but you have to know about the disciplines that support what you do. So talk about what books you're reading, talk about how you're improving your mind, how you're improving your body. So that competence becomes important. The next piece, the next C, is a little harder, and that's character. So that doing the right thing when no one's watching, doing something for somebody because it's the right thing to do, and not having it be transactional in terms of them being able to do something for you. So as a bit of a test, when it was time for me to interview company commanders, I would have company commanders come to my office. They would interview with my XO first. They would interview with my sergeant major, and they would interview with me. And there would be little gaps in between it. And after I talked to my sergeant major and I talked to my XO, I would then talk to my driver, because my driver was my executive assistant and ran the command group. And a lot of times, a good secret is that in terms of people doing something nice for folks that can't do anything for them, is how they treat other people when no one's looking. So I used to advise my daughters, if you want to know how a man acts, like, look, watch how he acts on a date, how he treats the wait staff, how he treats the folks that are around. And that can give you an indication as to their character in terms of their deportment. Because especially in this millennial environment, where very quickly a bad interaction can live forever off of a smartphone camera, or live forever if someone goes and Googles the organization, your reputation is so important. So, and character, not only from a individual perspective, but the character of the organization helps to determine what its success is going to be. Because once you have that bad reputation that you can't shake, it travels around the world. And it becomes important in terms of being able to advance the business. And then finally, I think the last C that I will look at is commitment. So what's that drive? What's that sense of resiliency? How do you take the long view? How do you take the marathon runner's perspective in terms of not only accomplishing the goals of your organization, but your own life goals as well. So when I talk to or I look at folks, I look for, hey, your competency, your character, and your commitment. And as we start to lay out what their growth path is in the organization, I try to affirm that, hey, how are you improving in the three C's? And then everything else that is necessary to survive and thrive in the organization builds from there.
Wow, that's so powerful. So, what I hear is that it's like what that brings me to is um, Stephen Covey's book, The Speed of Trust. So it's like when they're showing up to your unit, they want to gain not only your trust, but they want to be credible, and they want to build credibility. And in that book, he brings up the two of the words that you mentioned, character and competence, and those are the two cores of building that credibility. And there are, so, and that breaks down into two more cores for those two components, the character and competence. So would you say somebody who shows up to your unit and they have the three C's and they're improving on those three C's, does that build credibility with you and with the unit?
It does. It was funny. I talked to my boss about that in terms of trust. So when we talk mission command, we talk trust between individuals, trust among teams, and people get frustrated like, well, the Army talks trust or organizations talk trust, but we don't see it from our boss. And a lot of that is that trust only comes with experience and time. So my boss used to say, hey, first off the training, I have to get an idea of where you are in terms of level of knowledge and ability to accomplish tasks. Some things are inherently given in terms of trust because of time. So if you're in a maneuver organization, and let's say for the Army, you have a Ranger tab and your boss has a Ranger tab, there are certain things that they understand because of shared experience going through that type of training, and a code, if you will, say certain things that are believed or taken for granted just based off of that shared experience. So as people can look at things on your resume, they can look at things that were shared experiences. They get an idea of like, okay, hey, this gives me a barometer in terms of how much I should trust you. The rest of that trust is built in shared experience in the unit. So first you have to train, then you have to certify. Okay, hey, now that you've gone through this training, I'm certifying that you're able to accomplish these certain tasks. So once you have trained, once you're certified, then from there it starts to expand the trust bubble. But a lot of times trusting without that shared experience to draw from, or those credentials where it's like, okay, hey, I can look at those credentials and have an idea of what's going on. Unless it's an emergency situation, it becomes hard. Like we inherently trust a doctor in the emergency room. And then sometimes because of that situation, we don't ask those same questions or take the blinders off, because if we went and did that and didn't operate on some degree of trust in society, it would cease to exist. It would just grow to a screeching halt. But in most organizations where that time is there, you're not in an emergency situation. You have to look at what activities exist to build trust. So as I have new lieutenants or new leaders come into the organization, I try to look at, as a part of our professional development, our leader development program, what are those key events, whether it's sergeant's time training, whether they're going to the field for a field training exercise, an external evaluation, a emergency readiness exercise to test deployment skills, an actual deployment. What are those events that are collective training events for the organization where I can periodically assess what they're doing, and then from those assessments, I can certify that they're competent at these certain sets of tasks. And as they show those competencies, I add to their bucket of things to do. I give them more responsibilities. I give them more ambiguous tasks where I'm not telling them, hey, I need you to do steps A, B, and C to get to this end state. Here's the end state. Here's the general path. And then you can determine the best steps as long as you stay in my intent. But I have to have a good level of comfort and confidence and you're trained to be able to do that. So I think that's how it works. And sometimes you may see it where a boss may not necessarily articulate it. So you have to look at those things and kind of ask those questions for yourself. How do I build trust, not only with my boss, but with my organization? I remember reading in the old Army Officers Guide, no lieutenant has had their platoon go and all of a sudden magically put the platoon leader on their shoulders and carry him off. You hear music in the background, like Remember the Titans. Never goes down like that. Sometimes it goes down at a unit function. Hey, Lieutenant, you're okay. Or they invite you to do their reenlistment, or they introduce you to their loved ones. It's at that point where you're in, that you get it, that you're part of the platoon family, that they've accepted you in the same way you've accepted them, that they seek your mentorship, they talk to you before PT, that they engage you. And as people engage you and you have that shared meaning, I think that's where the trust starts to grow. But it's not this blinding flash of the obvious. And a lot of that just takes that investment of time in terms of being able to demonstrate and show your competencies. And I think that's how you build trust.
Wow. So it sounds like many things in life, building that trust, building that credibility, it's a process, right? So what would you say was the process that you initially went through navigating the same thing, and how did you navigate that space?
So if I go back to being a lieutenant, I think the thing I remember the most about it, my first duty assignment was Fort Polk, Louisiana. And growing up in Baltimore is a bit of a culture shock to see Western Central Louisiana. And I remember getting to the unit right away, and my boss was like, hey, we're taking North Fort, and our maintenance company was tasked to turn it into Bosnia in terms of laying concertina wire, filling sandbags, and turning it into a base camp to certify units before they would go to Bosnia. So I spent about 3 weeks from like 8 in the morning to like almost 6 at night in a pseudo field environment, building that out, watching my guys fill sandbags, like doing the forklift. And after a while, you just want to sit there and sit in your truck and eat and play on the radio, do whatever. So a lot of it was hands-on. And an opportunity to get that hands-on work with my soldiers, like, hey, let me help fill the sandbag. Hey, what are you doing? Let's carry this from point A to point B. Hey, my platoon sergeant, hey, Sergeant Brown, what's our task list for today, and what are the tasks we need to knock out? And then showing hands-on leadership helped, especially because my platoon was a supply support activity platoon. So we ran a warehouse. And what we did for that field problem in terms of the manual labor was fundamentally different from what we did in the warehouse, where we had a skeleton crew back there running it. So a lot of it was, again, building that credibility, not just being around my soldiers in terms of their day-to-day jobs, but other things around the organization. And then I think the easiest way to build trust is let a subordinate show you how to do something. So in my warehouse, like, okay, hey, those guys knew how to process parts, reconcile receipts, and load stuff off in the trucks. So I thought of it in terms of doing an internship. I spent about a couple of days out of a week with each one of my sections in the platoon. Hey, just learn the fundamentals of your job. And what I've discovered in terms of 20 years of being in the military is right when you get really good at doing a certain job, you're pulled out of it and you're put into a job where you have no idea of what's going on. It's the same thing I do in my current job now. So a lot of it is very quickly, and in my current job, I have a predominantly civilian workforce, and I ask all the time, hey, show me how to do X, Y, Z. Now, some of it, like where we talk about where ignorance isn't cool, you just can't go like, well, hey, I'm in charge, and I'm gonna just ask you guys to figure out things. You have to figure out what they do, then figure out where the gaps are, and then how you can capitalize on your prior experience, your connections, your network, your abilities to add value to the organization. So once you kind of get an idea of what everyone's doing, and then you get an idea of what that vision is, find out how you can fill in. Like a lot of times it's the communication between your organization and your higher headquarters. So be that liaison, be that cheerleader, be that provider of resources. And then I think as you provide value, and then just don't be a bad guy to be around, be a good person. And I think that folks will find you as the go-to person. And again, it'll build your credibility. So what I learned as a lieutenant is what I've applied in almost every job and every rank since then.
Wow. Yeah, I love that you continue to use what you learn and build up off of it. So you initially became a platoon leader and ran a warehouse, which was starkly different than what you thought you were going to do and what you really wanted to do at first. Can you tell
Yes.
me a little bit about that? How did that all work out?
So I can't remember if we talked about this before, but that was funny. So I'm an ordnance guy, so Jiffy Lube. My platoon was a warehouse platoon, Walmart. And I wrote my boss like, hey, I really want to be a ground support equipment platoon leader, GSC. It sounded cool. I did CTL, cadet troop leadership training. So I did a 2-week internship at Fort Sill, and it was a really fun platoon to shadow. So that's my dream platoon. And they're like, hey, sorry, that's your dream platoon, but this lieutenant got here 2 weeks before you. It's his platoon. Our quartermaster lieutenant's not going to get here for another 6 months. So you're going to the warehouse platoon. And oh, by the way, nothing that I received in my schooling at the officer basic course talked about running a supply support platoon in terms of the activity. So a lot of it was figuring it out. And then thinking that wouldn't be the case, I think in 14 assignments, I've only gone into the job I've expected to have twice, maybe 3 times. So something always changes, whether it's the type of unit, whether it's the type of job, and sometimes maybe it's the type of location. So a lot of it is just a learning orientation to go, okay, where can I learn about the job? So some of it is watching, in terms of watching how your organization operates. It's reading. So I remember one of my first battalion commander talked about he had a doctrine library in his bathroom. And every time he went to the bathroom, had a little FM by the toilet, he would sit and read. And everybody was laughing, all the lieutenants like, he. And I'm like, no, it's actually a pretty good idea. Because you want to be able to increase your amount of reading and read a little bit each day. So whether it's in your bathroom, whether it's by your nightstand, whether it's audible that you listen to while you clank weights or you run, but every day you should be learning something about your craft or your profession. And what I've discovered over time, every great leader I've had, every great boss I've had is always well-read. And they're not only just well-read about things that are in their profession, but they read about things in general. And being able to read about those things gives them different expertise or perspective that they can apply. So while they may be limited by their experience, when they take on the experiences of these authors and these different books that they read, whether it's fiction, whether it's nonfiction, whether it's sports, whether it's history, now they're exponentially increasing their experience base to the experience base of every author that they've read, people talking about those readings and their interactions and lessons learned. And it gives them a wider range of experiential knowledge to draw from to solve problems. So in that, when I went to this place and say, hey, you're not necessarily familiar with the job. Well, there's somebody that's done it before. There are books or manuals or procedures I can read. And then just to be humble to go, hey, I don't know it. Who's the best boss that you've had in here? What made him great? Who's the worst boss? What are things that I could avoid? Then reflect on those things against my skill sets. And then just say, hey, every day you want to get better and get after it.
Okay, so that's interesting. And it's funny that it seems like things just shifted on you time and time again. So you wanted to be GSC, you went to the SSA, to the warehouse, if you will. So where does the whole social worker play into all of that? How did that timeline shift?
So funny you mentioned that. I came to Morgan as a ROTC scholarship recipient. I picked political science, I think, is my major. I still had no idea what branch I wouldn't do anything going on. And my older cousin went to Morgan. And he was like, hey, E, did you make your schedule? I'm like, yeah, I'm taking 15 credits my first semester. I just want to take my time. He's like, hey, if you need an elective, take Intro to Group Dynamics. This guy named Gary Ware, like really, really cool. And I think you'll like it. And Gary was different, very different type of brother, but a good guy, real good guy. And I remember we used to sit in a circle and we used to talk these different things with regard to counseling, with regard to groups opening up. And I enjoyed it. And all the class was just sitting in a circle like group therapy and just talking different situations or things going on out, and then evaluating the relationships between people in the groups. And as I started to do, I'm like, hey, this sounds like something I would be interested in versus going the political science path. So at the end of the semester, I changed my major from political science to mental health. And our mental health department worked side by side with our social work department at Morgan. So at the time I said, well, hey, maybe I'll be a social worker in the Army and I'll go into the Medical Service Corps, do my 2 or 3 years as a Medical Service Corps platoon leader, and then try to get a master's of social work and become a social worker. So I did that, and I had internships in our social work department every semester. So my first year, I worked at a facility where we helped ex-offenders get job placement. And then I remember working as a filer, as an intern for a substance abuse counseling facility. And then between my sophomore and junior year, I worked for a program called Alternatives to Violence, where we worked with youth in terms of, hey, these are conflict resolution strategies and business coaching. So between my junior and senior year, I was going to go into counseling or assistance for domestic abuse. And it took me down an interesting path in terms of that perspective of social work and of counseling. And I said, I don't know if I want to do this. And I did my cadet troop leadership training. We were at a maneuver base, so all my peers went to field artillery organizations. They're like, hey, well, we've got the slot to an ordnance unit. And one of my mentors in ROTC was the ordnance officer at the time. So I'm like, oh, I'll try this out for a couple of weeks, see how it was. And it was fun. Soldiers had a lot of energy. The warrant officers were talking about, hey, this is what we're working on, fixing or trying to make happen to support the units. And it was my first real life introduction to the Army outside of what I saw in ROTC or what I saw at my summer camps. And it was fun. And now part of it, hindsight being 2020, I'm pretty sure most units would have been like that, independent of branch. But it was my first time seeing ordnance. I really, really liked it. A mentor role model I looked up to was ordnance. I wasn't happy per se in my academic major. So I was like, hey, I'll just jump over to ordnance. Maybe I'll pick up some new skills and I'll leave the Army after that. And I got into my first platoon after I graduated and commissioned. I really started to like it. And to your point, I think where the social work degree came in handy was that understanding what motivates people, understanding what concerns people. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then looking at those different things in terms of being able to provide motivation to soldiers. So we talk about this definition of Army leadership being provide purpose, direction, and motivation. Purpose is that understanding of your higher headquarters intent or the larger mission. So that reflects your social networks. Direction, I think, is your cognitive skill. So if you know your trade craft, going back to that competence piece, you can start to map out in your head, this is what I need my platoon, company, battalion, unit to do to accomplish a purpose. The motivation piece, I think, is what where the social work degree comes in. Like, how do you motivate people? And I think you best motivate people by caring for them and connecting with them. And soldiers and your subordinates are very smart. So if it's an artificial sense of care, they're going to see through it. If your audio doesn't match your video, especially by leading millennials where your life is in a glass bowl on display, they'll catch it. But if you truly care, if you're truly connected, and you're excited about what you do, and you're excited about leading these young men and women, and that excitement shows, I think that becomes motivating. It provides energy. It's like that person that motivates you for one more push-up on a run, or that NCO that's on a range and just gives you, like, or if you're in the field and you're in the suck, that battle buddy you can look over to and you can take one more step. I think that provides that motivation or connection. And the advantage, I think, of a social work degree is that all of the intangibles of how I just described that, and trying to put words like, hey, how does this motivate you, or why does this make sense? The social work degree helped me to peel back or the onion behind that, and then go, okay, hey, these are things that you can modify or shape in your behavior or strive to improve in. And as you strive to improve in those to become a better communicator, a better leader, everything comes into place. So that's how, even though I hardly do anything direct with my mental health degree, I try to apply a little aspect of it every day in terms of the science of motivating and organizing human capital.
Oh man, most definitely. So I love having these conversations because, you know, I my major was in soft sciences also, but I like to have the conversation of showing where soft science and soft skills have hard and tangible results. It's just hard to argue with sometimes. So I love that you highlighted that, because you definitely see the effect that your mind frame, what some of the soft skills have on your units, on your organizations. So I think that is very important to highlight. So right now, what I would like to hear is just, so we have someone who didn't who chose opinion of what they wanted to do, and it changed a few times, right? And then what you wanted, you didn't get, but you made the most of it. And then how long you thought you'd be in the military, you'd be in the Army, that has probably changed time and time again, yet again. So what has your journey been like? And what are some major lessons that you've learned along the way that you would like to pass
on? I think if I could best articulate it, the motivation targets change. So I had 3 company commanders as a lieutenant. And I remember interacting with my second one. I said I wanted to be a company commander just so I could apply leadership a little differently. Because I think the dynamic between my commander at the company level, my commander at the battalion level, was a little strained. And I didn't have the maturity at the time to understand why it was strained. I just looked at it and I said, well, hey, I could probably do this a little bit differently, but find a way to not have my soldiers get down about that, or have my frustration with my boss, or my frustration in my personal life, or my frustration with my peers be taken out on my soldiers. So initially, I wanted to just stand until company command, because I like, selfishly, I thought, oh, I can do it better. And I wound up waiting for command a lot longer than I expected. I commanded in Korea. And when I got there, my soldiers were just awesome. And that was probably the best job I ever could have had. And whether it was talking to my soldiers at a barbecue, or down in the motor pool, or out on a range, or in the field, you got to realize our military reflects our society. And for some of the naysayers about where we are at this point in history, the future is always bright just because of the people that we have or the young people that are around. And I remember one of my mentors told me a long time ago, no one joins the Army and recites the oath of enlistment, or for officers, the oath of appointment. Nowhere in any of those oaths is a direct or implied statement to be mediocre. Nobody swears an oath to be mediocre. Everybody swears an oath to be aspirational, be better than what they are, or to strive for something high. So everybody has that original intent. Then life smacks them in the face. And I think that's where they need a sense of personal resiliency. Sometimes you need to be able to draw strength from the organization and be able to connect to that larger why. And in service of that, it was like, hey, I'm gonna just hang around a little bit longer. And then I was fortunate to have really, really good mentors that said, hey, you ought to try some of these different things. So I went and I became a observer controller at the Army's National Training Center, which is an interesting aspect of teaching. So you're teaching by observing in the field, like, hey, giving a unit a different perspective and being able to watch all these units go through a combat training center rotation before they would deploy to combat gave me a lot of lessons learned. So I'm like, okay, hey, I get to see how this unit did this thing really well, or they could have improved in this aspect of it. I'm going to put this in my kit bag for when I go back to a tactical unit. And then I went from there. The Army paid for me to go to grad school. I think the military paying or an employer paying for you to go to school versus you paying for it yourself and trying to figure that out, it frees up your mind. So that way I could really get an appreciation for folks that get scholarships or get fellowships, because it's a gift. So now instead of worrying about balancing my work schedule versus my study schedule, being paid to go to school, it's like, okay, I can really invest time into that. So it showed me, hey, where my employer wanted to invest in me, and then, hey, the return on that investment is to be able to give back to my service and be the best type of leader I can be. So I did my utilization time for that, then went back to troops. I did that for 3 years, deployed to combat, and then from there came to West Point and came across you, came across Terry, came across Nigel, all the great cadets at West Point, where kind of like OCing, but this time like peeling it back a little bit further, and then the human capital that comes around the U.S. Military Academy in terms of the cadets that are selected to go there, the faculty and staff that are selected to go there, and then the unique design of the institution really helped me to peel back, not only understanding leadership, but also understanding human development in terms of, hey, this is the pipeline of how we want to build leaders of character, not only for our military, but for our society. And then from there, just going back out to the field again, and then getting those experiences. So what I think I like about the journey is that there are times where the Army wants me to do specific things or needs me to do specific things in my occupational specialty. And then you get times what we call broadening, where you get to take a step away and see how our larger government works or our institutional Army works. And then again, being able after that step away, and where that oftentimes becomes a break or a respite for the family, it recharges everyone's batteries and you're able to get back into the grind. So I've noticed that that's been the ebb and flow of my career over time. And our family's grown to like and enjoy that in terms of being able to take those steps away, reflect and grow, and then be able to get back into the fight, if you will, and give back to the institution or apply what we've learned. So it's been a good experience.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. So with that, I just kind of wonder. So now that you've opened up the journey to us, and we see where you are now, um, what would you say that you struggle with now, because I want to be able to allow the leaders to see where the possibility of them going. So what would you say? What is a challenge for you now versus what was a challenge when you were a new lieutenant, or the typical challenge that new lieutenants go through?
I think so the way I'll answer is two things. So I'll say something that was a challenge then, it's not a challenge now, and I'll say, hey, something that's been a challenge universal, just because of it's a fault in my character. And I think some of it, just a lesson learned to your listeners, is identify flaws in your character, and then if they're not incredibly egregious, build mechanisms around yourself to help check for those. So Lieutenant McCoy had a credibility thing. So I'm new to the unit. No one knows my commissioning source. I don't have a whole bunch of bling on my uniform in terms of like really cool schools and the like. So it's like you want to build credibility. And I remember someone telling me competence is the rank equalizer. So if you're the most competent officer, you're the most competent person on the team, after a while, the trappings of rank or position are secondary to that expertise that you can provide. So a lot of initial friction I had, I used to come home boohoo to my wife, who's my fiance at the time. I don't know why my warrant officers don't like me. The lieutenants looked at me funny. One of my warrant officers wants to fight me. And I think I was trying too hard in terms of that credibility. So your credibility will come in time. Don't necessarily force it. Just look for those opportunities to shine. So as I moved up in rank and your reputation precedes you, a lot of times your credibility will speak for itself. So I remember leaving battalion command, and I went to go and be the chief of logistics or chief of sustainment for the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii. I remember my chief of staff told me, "Hey, Eric, welcome. 4 leaders called me about you. We're excited to have you here." And I'm like, "What do you mean 4 leaders called you, sir?" He's like, "Yeah, I had 4 senior leaders in the Army call this week talking about you coming." To this day, don't know who they were. Don't know if he was pulling my chain. But what winds up happening is that after a while, as you build credibility in the profession, your reputation precedes you. So I think in hindsight, if I could give Lieutenant McCoy advice, like, hey, don't necessarily go through the growing pains of fighting, just be competent, show up and work hard, and every day focus on doing the right thing. Your reputation will build itself. What I have a challenge with now that I had a challenge with as a lieutenant is patience. That my mind will overwork some things, and sometimes it's at the detriment of certain things. So like I used to joke with somebody, because I didn't really play sports growing up. I don't really follow any team sports. Like I'm conversant enough in football just to stay out of trouble at work. I watch pro wrestling, and nowadays I watch UFC. So most of my time at home, I can spend reading books or doing things Army related. But as a result, I get impatient, and I won't wait for a response from somebody, or like, hey, it's not working fast enough, so I'm going to call HRC again to get an update on something that's going on, or I want to ping my higher headquarters on where this award is. And sometimes, the difference between, being that go-to lieutenant and being a pain in the butt. Well, I think that reflects my attention deficit in terms of being able to deal with patience. So I realized that I was talking to my wife about my sons, where I see a lot of that same lack of impulse control and impatience for doing things. And what I talked about earlier, where it's like, hey, you have to have a contingency mechanism. Well, my contingency mechanism for my lack of patience is my wife. So very quickly, she can speak truth to power and go, hey, Eric, you're tripping, or hey, this doesn't make any sense. You need to take a step back, wait a week, call them then, or just hang up the phone, go do this, that, and the other, versus doing Army stuff. So it took me a while to realize that, okay, hey, that this has been a problem over time. So which is why you kind of need that board of directors that can give it to you straight, no chaser. So whether it's your significant other, whether it's your parents, whether it's your first platoon sergeant, whether it's your first battalion commander, someone that you have a relationship with, over time that's not necessarily tied to your current organizational structure that can kind of give it to you straight if something's going on. So yeah, those were the two big faults that kind of jump out to me. Plenty of others, but for the base of the time, we'll keep moving. But that's how I look at those, and in terms of different ways to compensate for that, so it doesn't negatively impact an ability to lead organizations.
Oh, that's so powerful. So thank you for sharing. Thank you, because this is all about just helping the next generation get insight and know what's out there and what could I possibly be up against when I get to a certain level someday. So I really appreciate that. So yeah, my next question, and I definitely want to be mindful of your time, and we'll start wrapping things up. Is so what is your purpose, and how you define that, and how do you live stepping into that every day?
So it's funny. I didn't realize I went through a leadership workshop when we were at West Point on authentic leadership, and they kind of asked to get out of the workshop, because I remember it was snowing, it was crazy. You have to have a purpose statement, and I remember I was like trying to think of something that was catchy, and it went back to something I heard from a boss of mine, and something in comics we call retroactive continuity, where it's something that comes up and you're like, hey, this was always my purpose statement. I think a modification of that was this was my purpose statement, and I never realized it until that moment where I had to go and put words to it. So I would say my purpose statement is to expand the art of the possible for people that I serve. So in that, when you look at logistics, a logistician in terms of supply chain, we want to be able to expand options for the commander. So you want to be able to give them prolonged endurance, freedom of maneuver, and extended operational reach. So you want to expand his options. So if he's got a full round of ammunition, vehicles are fueled up, soldiers are rested, he can do A, B, C, and D, versus if he's short on any of those, he's limited to just A and B. So and the purpose of my job is like, okay, I want to expand the art of the possible for my customers. From a human dimension, or from a human potential dimension, you want to help people grow. So expanding the art of the possible is helping people grow, and helping people grow gives me purpose, because a lot of times I think we chase the wrong things, that when we all transition from this plane, we don't have anything to show for it. So your cars don't go with you. Your material acquisitions don't go with you. You're remembered by the people that you've touched, the folks that you've taught, investing in your kids, investing in your grandkids, investing in your nieces and nephews, investing in the people that you love and care about. So by expanding their art of the possible, you transcend what you're able to do. So it was weird in that moment when I kind of thought about that. I'm like, that is my purpose, and that's how I try to get after it. So, and each day, if I'm expanding the art of the possible, whether it's for one of my clients, whether it's for a unit I'm supporting, whether it's for my workforce, whether it's for one of my mentees, whether it's for a member of my family, it's like, okay, hey, that was a day well spent or above ground. And then it just go, hey, get some sleep, wake up the next day, and attempt to repeat.
Wow, that's so deep. I'm gonna need you to break that down for me. It's expand the R of the possible.
Expanding the art, A-R-T, of the possible.
Oh, the R.
So
R. Okay,
yeah,
got
yeah,
it.
no
Got
worries.
it.
So
Yeah.
my old boss, when I worked in the Joint Staff J4, Lieutenant General Chris Christensen, used to say that when we talked about logistics, he's like, hey, you're expanding the art of the possible for the warfighter. So a lot of times people are like, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z. Well, the ability to do that oftentimes is off the logistician that's in the general's ear, saying, hey, sir, we're out of pack mules. You're going to run out of supplies at this point. Or, hey, at some point, you got to stop doing maintenance. So a really good logistician expands his commander's art of being able to do the different things that he wants to do. So when you kind of look at, hey, being a life logistician, if you will. So not just like logistics supplies, but just like life skills. Like, hey, you want to expand people's art of the possible. You want to expand what they otherwise think they can do. And then it's like, I think the fun space of that is trying to help them figure out how you can do that. So is it being a life skills coach? Is it providing a certain type of material? Is it being able to assist with reflective capacity? So then just trying to figure out, hey, how can I help make you better? How can I help expand what you're able to do? And then it just grows from there.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, like I said, yeah, I'm one of those people. When I say let's wrap it up, I really mean it. I ain't gonna take it on and on and on. But I just, I want to thank you for just dropping gems tonight. So thank you. Is there anything that you would like to add that I may have missed right before we get out of here?
No, Barry, I definitely appreciate it. Probably in the last minute, what I would tell your folks, I mentioned from the Green Notebook before, one of the things I've recently picked up on is I'm working as a senior fellow for the Army Center for Junior Officers. For folks back in the day that are pre-millennials, remember as the Cow Doll, or the folks that made companycommand.mil, platoonleader.org. Lots of great information there. So if you just Google Center for Junior Officers, if you're in the profession and you're looking for ways to improve as a leader, lots of great things for Army officers out there, and you can be excited for a lot of the programs that myself and the other fellows are going to come up with for the force over the year. So I would definitely encourage everyone, if they get a chance, to go check that out. And again, thanks so much for the time, Barry. Really appreciate it. I'm excited to see how your platform grows in terms of helping your audience expand their art of the possible as well.
Most definitely. And last thing, if anything you said, which I know it will, resonates with somebody, how can they reach out to you to continue a conversation or something like that?
Sure. So the easiest way, I'm glad one of my mentors was like, hey, you don't want to have one of those crazy emails like hot like fire 63 at Yahoo. So real simple. Eric.andrewmccoy at gmail.com, MCCOY. I like the real McCoy. So if you hit me up there, I'm all about flat comms. Happy to help out your listeners or get them connected with the right people.
Most definitely. Thank you. All right, folks. So this is the Leadership Library. This is what you can expect. We are going to be engaging with some powerful folks who are doing wonderful things as leaders to get insight and help you understand what is expected of you before you arrive to your respective industries. So most definitely, I am Barry Ball. It has been a pleasure. Much love.